So we have to stand guard at the palace of our mind to protect it from the outside forces that can negatively influence it and actually sabotage our own progress.
Simon, you are an award-winning life coach, business strategist, and public speaker based in London with a new book coming out in 2022 called Energize: How to Harness Your Energy and Make the Most of Every Moment. Simon, I am so excited to talk today. I find your style of communication so compelling. The messages you communicate around enabling personal success. And you have such big ideas, but you're able to make them easily digestible for people. And today I want to talk about some of them. And the first one is this idea of responsibility. There's a great quote by 19th century poet and essayist, American essayist, Ralph Waldo Emerson. He says, "The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." And those ideas, the ideas that it's our responsibility. Success is our responsibility. And success is also a choice that we make. These are very profound, compelling, critical tools to set the foundation for personal success. And you've talked about this before, and I'd love for us to expand on it today.
Definitely. I think, Pooja, that responsibility is really the beginning of personal development. The reason I say that is before we are in a position to develop ourselves, many people are in what I would say is a victim mentality, i.e. the circumstances they are in, the situation they are in, the challenges they have is everyone else's responsibility, everyone else's fault apart from themselves. And what they fail to realize is no change can ever occur until we take responsibility for where we are and where we are going. And that, for me, is always the first step to any change that occurs in our life. And the moment we take responsibility, what happens is we move from this idea of being interested to this idea of being committed. And I use these words purposefully. Now, many of us, when we begin a new year, for example, we are interested to be healthier. We are interested to earn more money. We are interested to finally start that business or project, but yet we don't. And we repeat the same resolutions and same goals year in and year out, sometimes over decades, before we even make one tiny step forward. And that's because many of us are just interested. Now, once we decide to take responsibility for our current circumstance and for where we want to be, we begin to build a bridge from interest to commitment. And that is a powerful bridge to build, because once we land in the arena of commitment, that is our voice telling our subconscious that we have decided this will happen. And you can tell when you speak to someone if they're interested or committed by the very words and language they use. When they tell you, I must do this, or I will do this, I've got this planned, this tells you they're committed. Once you're committed, your mind then moves to what I call base two. And base two is how? How are we going to do it? How are we going to start? And for me, that is a beautiful place to be, because when your mind starts asking you how, you know that you are now in an action-oriented place. The mind is seeking ways forward. The mind is seeking possibility rather than limitation. And what happens is now you have told your filtering system to look out for opportunities, to look out for ways that you can progress, and to look out for the right people who can show you the way.
It's beautiful. It reminds me of this quote by the poet Rumi. He said, "It's your road and only your road to travel. Others may walk with you, but no one can walk that road for you." And you're getting at that. It's wonderful to surround ourselves by people that can help us manifest what we want. But at the same time, it's only us who can execute, only us. So that's a very powerful idea that we're kind of getting at, many ideas. And I also want to bring in this idea of visualization. Once we take responsibility, we make that choice, we want to succeed, we're committed to that. The next in my mind is, what is it? What is it that we want? And easier said than done, right? There's so many people who write books about this, how to find your passion, how to find your purpose in life. Visualization is something that so many of the greats have used. Oprah Winfrey, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I remember reading that Arnold Schwarzenegger used visualization throughout his entire life. He visualized what he wanted to be, and then he lived that each and every day, experienced that. You know, the late Dr. Wayne Dyer, he used to say that you already are what you want to be. You are embodying every day what you want to be. So that step also is so critical, isn't it? This idea of visualizing, having a vision for yourself, and then living it every day.
Definitely, because if we don't have a vision of what we want to accomplish, who we want to be, and the sort of impacts we want to have in the world, then there is no context for the actions that we need to take today. There's no context. And so it's important to understand, where is my destination? Where am I heading? Now, for many of us, we can get overwhelmed when we think about this, Pooja. You know, I often get people telling me that, well, I don't know what my purpose is. You know, when I understand what my purpose is, then I can do this, and that. And I think we can place a lot of pressure on ourselves when we say, well, until I know my purpose, I'm not going to take any action. But that
Yes.
isn't how this game works. It is very rare, and I don't know anyone that I've spoken to who has told me that they woke up one morning and they had a eureka moment and they knew exactly what they were put on this earth to do. That is rare. I mean, it may happen in Hollywood films, but it sure hasn't happened in reality. Now, what actually happens is, rather than focusing on what your purpose is, which can be very heavy and overwhelming, is to soften the question a little bit. And instead of asking yourself, well, what is my purpose? What was I put on this earth to do? Is to simply ask right now, in this very moment, what am I most curious about? What am I most curious about? Now, your curiosities may not take you where you want to be, but I've discovered that they always take you where you need to be. And the thing to remember with your curiosities is, the more you take action on them, the closer you get to understanding what your purpose is, because that clarity can only come to you through action. Now, once you start taking some small steps, you begin to open up a universe of opportunities and insights that you would never have had before. And I think once we get to that place, visualization can be very powerful, because now we're in the realm of what if, what could be. So if, for example, when I started my journey from employee to entrepreneurship to what I now get to do today, the first step I did was to broaden my horizons. Before, I spent the majority of my working day with people in finance. I went drinking with people in finance after work. I spent my weekends with friends in finance. So it was a bubble. However, when I decided to broaden my horizons and to just pursue my curiosity of wanting to learn from a more diverse environment, that's when I was in a better position to visualize. I was thinking, well, what could be possible if I was spending time with journalists or coaches or mentors or entrepreneurs or leaders? And suddenly I was flooded with an ocean of ideas of what I could do. And now my visualization started to get really deep, because the colors started to get brighter, the granularity got deeper, and I was able to see far more specific and precise of where I want it to be. So I think it's first reflecting on what you're most curious about, and then understanding at a deeper level that there is always wisdom in your curiosities. They are there for a reason. And the way I like to talk about curiosities is almost like it's your heart speaking to you. It sends you a signal that has no words, but communicates to you through emotion and energy. You know, when you're drawn to something, there's a reason you're drawn to something. When you feel repelled by something, chances are there's a reason you feel repelled by something. It's sort of your inner guide trying to point you in the direction of where your talents lie. The challenge for us is to silence ourselves so we can listen to that. And what we discover through whether it's meditation or taking some time out or slowing down is that silence is rarely empty. It is full of answers.
Beautifully said, Simon. I talk about it this way: the more silent we are inside, the more powerful we become outside. And I love your discussion of your history. You know, a lot of people do put so much pressure on themselves to find what it is that they love to do, because that's what we're told when we're young. What do you want to do? What do you love to do? So the idea that finding your passion can be an onerous thing is something that we should really make people aware of. There's a book about passion where it talks about how finding your passion, like you said, isn't an instantaneous thing. It happens over the course of journey, of experience, and of, as you said, being able to be self-aware, which comes with that silence, that stillness in your life. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about purpose and meaning. You know, Martin Luther King, he obviously was a great civil rights advocate and so much more. But one thing he did was talk about mindset and how to overcome the ego. And I found it so profound when he gave a speech on purpose being the best way to deflate your ego, meaning that when you find a purpose beyond yourself, when you no longer think life is all about you, your meaning and purpose elevate. They become greater. They transcend you. And that's when they become so deep, and the connection with you and them becomes so strong that your ability to execute and visualize becomes simple. I find it very important in our day and age, particularly with social media, to be able to get out of ourselves, to be able to transcend ourselves and make our purpose greater than us.
Well said, Pooja. You know, when I talk about purpose, I believe that when we begin to understand what our purpose is, what is something that we believe in so much that we will show up and give our all because we are contributing to a story bigger than ourselves, that unlocks the greatest source of energy that there is going. And the quote that comes to my mind as I heard you speak was something that the Indian philosopher Patanjali wrote, where he said that when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds, your mind transcends limitation, your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself in a new, great, and wonderful world. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents awaken, and you discover yourself to be far greater than you ever imagined. And that touches on to one of my core beliefs, which is our value as humans on this planet is determined by how much more we have given to the world than we have taken from it. And that journey for myself and a lot of clients that I get to work with is really a journey. When we talk about ego, it's a journey from ego to humility, or as I like to say, it is a journey from career virtues to legacy virtues. Now, career virtues are the things that we find on a typical CV or resume. They're the things such as what company you worked for, how much money you earn, what position you hold, and what power you have, what clubs you're a part of. That is what we call career virtues. Those are the sort of things you would tell an employer or you would show off on your CV. However, as we get older and wiser, we make this journey from career virtues to focusing our energy on legacy virtues. And legacy virtues are things such as, what impact did I have in my organization and the community I'm in? What stories have I shared about my journey that has gone on to set the light in others to go out and share their stories? And here's the interesting thing about career virtues and legacy virtues. Career virtues die with you, legacy virtues live on beyond you. That's why they're called legacy virtues, because they're contributing to your legacy. And that is why when we understand the role of our ego and we are better at managing it, we're able to make that journey towards humility. And here's an example of where humility really serves us. We are, whenever we embark on a new path in life, when we pivot, when we change careers, or we try something new, guaranteed you are going to face challenges and setbacks and failures. This is part of life. This is part of growing. This is part of evolution. Now, when you come from the perspective of ego, it is not your fault. It is always someone else's fault. However, when you come from the perspective of humility, you are always seeking the lesson in every experience and event. And you're pausing to reflect on what could be better. How could I improve? And the journey away from ego is really a journey deeper into self-awareness. And you can't have self-development without self-awareness. And that is why one of the most common activities, Pooja, that I prescribe my clients and audiences to participate in is that of journaling. Because as my friend Diana Chow once told me, writing is humanity distilled into ink.
It's beautiful. These ideas, Simon, thank you for sharing them. Ego is such an important facet of self-development and growth, self-actualization. And this idea of being able to manage it. And it's really managing our monkey mind. That's really what it is. Managing our mind being in the past or being in the future. And this idea of presence that I'll get to a little bit later is so incredibly powerful to make things clear. I know you've talked a lot about consistency. So we've talked about responsibility. We've talked about finding meaning and purpose. We've talked about visualization, imagination, if you will. Now, let's talk about execution. And I've heard you talk a lot about consistency, and you've given just a fantastic story from Will Smith. He talked about how, to him, consistency is about building a brick house, right? Laying one brick at a time. Can you expand on that for our audience, that little analogy or story that you have given in the past?
Sure. So the story that Will Smith once shared when he was doing an interview was that when he was growing up, his father asked him to build a brick wall. Now, you got to keep in mind that this was a young Will Smith, and he was overwhelmed by this labor of building a brick wall. Yet his father told him, and he learned from this job, that the only way to finish building a brick wall was to focus on one brick at a time. To put down and place one brick in the most perfect way possible and do the same thing with the next one, the next one, and the next one. And eventually you will have built a brick wall. Consistency for me is one of the most important contributors to success. Responsibility may get you started, commitment may get you started, but you will never arrive at where you want to be without consistency. Because when I look at entrepreneurs and businesses and people that have had big ideas and visions of what they wanted to manifest, what I've seen is that the starting is always easy. the starting is always easy. And that's because it is easy to be infused or energized about an idea. It's far harder to execute and stay the journey in being consistent in your actions. And so that's why for me, when I look at my own journey, when I look at the people around me who've succeeded in their own fields, that level of consistency is what differentiates them from the many.
Absolutely.
If I were to illustrate it in a practical way for the listeners to be able to apply consistency in any area of their life, think about it this way. If you had an area that you wanted to improve, whether that's your finances, your health, your business, or even your relationships, if you took just one tiny step each day, it doesn't have to be big, just has to be a step forward each day. In a year from now, that is 365 steps forward. Just imagine where you could be a year from now.
Absolutely. And it's really exponential, isn't it? It just builds on itself. It snowballs. And again, easier said than done, but how powerful to be able to intellectualize what you can manifest. I want to talk a little bit about conforming, Simon, in a world today, and actually it's always been like this in humanity. Colin Powell once said, trying to make everybody like you is a sign of mediocrity. Trying to make everybody like you is a sign of mediocrity. I love that. And it's hard when you see the world manifesting their journey or on their journey and being that person who is independent enough to stay on your own path. I want to read you a quote again from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after our own. But the great man is he who, in the midst of the crowd, keeps the perfect sweetness, the independence of solitude. So what he's saying here is it's easy for us to have our own thought process when we're alone. But when we're in the world, when we're out there trying to achieve our goals, it's much harder to not look the other way. Indeed. And not compare and not be a follower. And success is so, we've talked a lot about what enables it, but having independent thought is, in my mind, so critical. Being that person who can be that individual in the world. And again, it's a lonely road. Indeed.
I mean, anyone who accepts the responsibility to be a leader of any kind, whether that is within the professional world, the local community, within the personal world, they are in some ways going down, as you say, Pooja, a lonely road. However, what I often share is that if we want to be an effective leader, it always begins with powerfully leading ourselves first. Now, when I say this, and we spoke about other people's opinions and conformity, I'm not saying we should discount everyone's opinion, but when we have the confidence and self-esteem, we are able to listen to what people say, but not take it to heart, or we can just pick what resonates with us. We're not emotionally attached to what they say. We see it just as feedback, and we can take whatever resonates with us and is constructive. And I think this is important to distinguish. Whenever we get feedback, there will be a difference between valid criticism and just hate. And you are going to get that in the world. I've realized that whenever you show up in the world, whether that is now through content or video or audio, there will always be people that will hate whatever you do. There will be people that will love what you do. And there will be the majority in the middle that, aren't really swayed either way. And so we can't let the small minority of people influence how we see ourselves and our own self-esteem. The visualization I have in my mind as I explain this to you, Pooja, it's almost like imagine if your mind is this boat that is in the middle of an ocean, and you've got an ocean potentially of negativity and an ocean that wants you to conform to everyone else. Now, as long as you can keep guard on your boat, you can continue rowing and sailing towards dry land or wherever your destination is. But the moment you allow the ocean of negativity to come into your boat, you start sinking. Your mind starts feeling heavier. It's difficult to move forward. So we have to stand guard at the palace of our mind to protect it from the outside forces that can negatively influence it and actually sabotage our own progress.
Beautifully said. Absolutely beautifully said, Simon. We've talked a lot in this field about process and outcome. And I know that you've spoken, I think it was with Brianna Weist several weeks ago, on this very topic. And there's something to be said about the balance between achievement and contentment. Being able to, in our world, where everything, success is measured so much, right, on what we achieve, what we accomplish. And we feel that that's our reward system, that this idea that I will be happy when my accomplishment is seen, when I'm done. And as we know, and you've talked about it in the past, being happy now is the end game. That's the goal that we should all be hoping to achieve. And there's a beautiful saying, I don't know if you know the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, but I'm going to read you something he said on this exact topic. To be happy with yourself in the present moment while maintaining a dream of your future is a grand recipe for manifestation. When you feel so whole that you no longer care whether it will happen, that's when amazing things materialize before your eyes. Isn't that beautiful? This idea that while we are working, we are also content. While we are trying to achieve, we are happy with our day. And Brianna said it so beautifully as well. She said, you're only doing it right if your outcome is living aligned with your true self every day and being satisfied with that process every day. Again, easier said than done. And especially as entrepreneurs, Simon, as you very well know, there will be times where we're in front of our computer and we're answering emails, where we are writing. And it's, as you probably know, it's incredibly hard, grueling process sometimes to write. And we might not be happy in that moment. And being self-aware that what we're doing in the present is a means to an end, right? We're trying to get to the place that we think when we get there we'll be happy, instead of saying, I'm happy now doing this. There's a lot to be said here. And I'd love to get some of your tips and advice for our audience on how you stay present while, of course, having these goals for yourself.
Sure. Well, some great words you've shared there, Pooja, from Brianna, Joe Dispenza, amongst others. And my thoughts on this is that so many of us suffer from what I would call destination addiction. We're addicted to arriving at destinations, whether that is a promotion, a relationship, a title, the six-figure salary, the investment from the venture capital firm. And what happens is that we are delaying happiness or those positive emotions to some time in the future. Now, my challenge to people who do go through destination addiction and say, I'll be happy when, is something that I've learned is, in reality, there is no end. Because if there is an end, what next? Now, if I look at the sports field, it is far easier for a team to win their first trophy than it is their second, the third, or the fourth. And the reason is because when you're going for that first trophy, you've got nothing to lose. That is in your vision. That is what you're focused on. But if you believe that that is your end, then what happens next, as we see in many fields, is you become complacent. You take your foot off the pedal and you forget what you did to get there. So for me, when I look at my journey, when I look at the way I live, for me, there is no end. And Simon Sinek talks beautifully about this in his book, The Infinite Game, is that life itself is an infinite game. And so the only goal we should be having, and this helps us to live in the moment, is to simply be better than who we were yesterday. The British philosopher Alain de Botton also said, and I love this because it speaks a lot to what I do, is he said that if you are not embarrassed by who you were a year ago, you are not learning or growing enough. And that's what happens when we're growing, we're developing every day. Now, on the concept of being happy now, but also having something to work towards, having a dream to inspire us forwards, that is what I would call nirvana, because once we are in that position, that is how we experience flow. This concept of flow, or as I would like to say, this concept of energetic flow, because you are energized in the moment, because you are happy, you are flooded with personal positive emotions. And this idea of something that you're working towards, when you have these two things present in your mind, that's when you're in this experience of flow. Now, I often get asked by people who perhaps aren't the happiest or most positive in this moment, how do I get into that mood? And for me, Pooja, the fastest way to elevate our mood, our emotion, and our energy in the now is gratitude. Now, a lot of people talk about gratitude. The word that is important here is purposeful and intentional gratitude, because I think we've forgotten the purpose of gratitude. Nowadays, every book, every article online, videos tell us to be grateful. And so what we do is we pick a couple of random things and we say, I'm grateful for this and for that thing, and we move on, and we just do it as a tick box exercise. So to really experience the benefit of gratitude, it is to slow down and to purposefully express it. And here's one powerful activity I do, and I always recommend people to do to get the benefit immediately. So the first step is to write down the name of one individual right now that comes first to your mind that you can be grateful for whatever reason. Maybe this person has helped you in some way recently. Maybe this individual has been your biggest supporter through tough times that you have gone through. The second step is to write down in as much detail as possible why you chose this person. Get specific, get detailed, and flesh out the visuals of these ways that this person has helped you. And the third step is where this comes into its own. In the third step, you want to pick up the phone and call this person and tell them word for word what you wrote down. This is intentional and purposeful gratitude, because you are in that moment feeling what it's like to express that gratitude. As Tim Ferriss once said, if you feel grateful for someone, but you do not express it, it is like buying a present for Christmas for them and never giving it. So that's why when we express gratitude with intention and purpose, it, as Pam Grout would say, becomes the gateway drug to abundance. So when we blend that sort of gratitude, which creates that happiness in the moment, that contentment, as you said just now, Pooja, it gives us the energy to focus on what we have already within us. And that's what moves our mind from a lack of resources to resourcefulness. So we bridge that gap from believing, well, I can't get there, whatever there is, because I have a lack of resources, to actually, how can I use what I already have and get creative? And suddenly we find ways that we never saw before.
It's beautiful. It makes me think about how And we don't talk a lot about this, how gratitude can dampen ego.
Mm.
So really, in a way, by having this intentional gratitude, by experiencing it, we are able to master our ego, which keeps us in that stillness, that presence, which is the zone that you're talking about. And athletes are such great examples for presence. There's a spiritual leader, Sri Ravi Shankar. He talks about the mind being able to do two things: relax in that meditation, mindfulness, contemplation sense, and focus. And in both of those ways, focus and relaxation, you are in present in a very deep, very visceral way. And by bringing in this idea of gratitude, I think it really puts it full circle and creates another aspect of this. It's very profound. And thank you, Simon, for sharing that. I would love to hear about you. I think, am I right that you were a martial artist in martial arts when you were young? And of course,
So
we both went to the London School of Economics, and we have that in common, being in the kind of yuppie world of finance. I think people would love to know how you journeyed from having all these experiences and, of course, having curiosities and now becoming a life coach and having this fantastic career.
Sure. So on the martial arts, Pooja, I grew up in a very stereotypical Chinese household. I was born here in the United Kingdom to two Malaysian Chinese parents who moved here from Malaysia. And from a young age, they wanted me to learn martial arts, maybe because they were afraid of me being bullied, or they thought it would just be good to know some self-defense. So when I was young, I learned karate. When I was a teenager, I was learning taekwondo. And then post-graduation, I learned some Wing Chun. So that was a very stereotypical upbringing. And it certainly helped me at school when people knew I was learning martial arts, that they didn't want to rub me up the wrong way. However, at the same time, part of that upbringing meant that I grew up with the understanding and belief that success was defined by my job title. So I grew up with the understanding that I would be viewed as success by my family if, after graduation from college, I would be either a banker, a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. So these very typical roles that many graduates aspire to work in simply because they pay a decent salary. I ended up choosing the banking route. That's what led me to the London School of Economics, and started my career a year before the financial crisis, and with a company called Lehman Brothers, which collapsed into bankruptcy in September 2008. So that proved a very volatile start to my career. But while it was admittedly scary and very painful at the time, in hindsight, it was a beautiful blessing in disguise, because that moment would prove to be the catalyst to where I am today. In a nutshell, it set me off on the longest path that we as humans take, the inches from our heads to our hearts. And I started to ask myself some simple but deep questions that few of us take time to reflect on. These were, just to illustrate, what did success mean to me? Now, up until this point, I didn't seriously give that question much thought because, as I said, I grew up with the belief that success was driven by job titles. And so for the first time, I had this opportunity to step back and ask myself, what did success mean to me? The second question was, what did fulfillment look like? And the third was, what sort of impact did I want to have in the world? And so I set off by following these curiosities, these ideas that I put down on paper. And I got involved in two early businesses, which didn't work out. But finally, it led me to the world of coaching. I remember going to a 2-day seminar here in London just to understand what coaching was all about. And by the end of the weekend, I came away from that event asking myself, what if I could do coaching full time? What if this could be my career? And these ideas, which initially just started as ideas, began to increase in seriousness the more the years went on. And it was 2012 when I qualified as a coach by attending one of these coaching institutions here in the UK. And it was a couple of years after that when I finally decided to make the jump from being an employee to an entrepreneur. And I'm not going to lie, Pooja, it was not an easy transition, because although on the outside it can look straightforward, for example, Simon has gone from working in a bank to now coaching, speaking, and writing. What people don't see is the mental battles and the mental challenges that occur in that transition.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so many people who are listening to you today, Simon, are probably in that same struggle. And it is a struggle that is necessary, isn't it? And by leaning into it and welcoming it is how we will eventually manifest what we're after. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, Simon. Thank you so very much. Your insights are so profound, so helpful, so pertinent to today's world. Thank you so much for being here today.
My absolute pleasure, Pooja. It was great to be here on the show. And if I may, sort of one final thought to leave the
Please.
listeners with is, in the last year, I became a father for the first time in what was a very surreal moment, because my wife and I gave birth a few days after the country went into its first lockdown, and everyone across the planet was on edge. My parents, so my dad and his partner, my wife's parents, could not travel to be with us in that moment. However, I was reminded of a very important fact, that when I was holding my daughter in my arms for the very first time, in the minutes after she was born, I was reminded that we are all a miracle. That the fact that you and I are alive right now means that you are a miracle. And we forget that we have won the greatest lottery there is going. And the question that we have to keep asking ourselves, especially in times of darkness and setbacks and failure, is what am I going to do with this winning ticket that I have got in my hands? Because we all have a winning ticket. Many people didn't have that or had the opportunity to be alive for whatever circumstances, but we have a winning ticket in our hands. And when we make full use of it, that is what life is for. That is what life is for. And when we do, we will embark on the greatest adventure that we can ever be on.
For more on how to find calm and freedom in a fast-paced world, hit the subscribe button below. And please share this wisdom with someone you love.